The wilderness has many voices, and every night they call to the living. The people of Inri do everything in their power to avoid responding. So every night, before the sun left earth, the strapping began. Mothers bound their children in rope from palm fronds before laying them in bed at night. Husbands strapped their wives' in-laws and then strapped their own bodies as tight as they could. The most desperate of men went a step further, tying an additional rope around their neck, for they thought it better to risk choking to death in their sleep than to be summoned by the beasts of the night. This was the harsh reality of life in the Inri kingdom, a place where horrors were born at night and unleashed in the morning. And despite the protection of the earth goddess Allah, the dark forces of the wilderness remained a challenge few could conquer. As the people would say, even the tightest rope may be loosened by the wind. This night, the rope got loose. Amobi lay on his bed, fiddling with the loosely placed ropes around his body. His heavily pregnant mother had strapped him moments prior, and in her exhaustion, she hadn't realized how loose the straps were. Of course, the boy never bothered to tell her of this mistake. It was more comfortable sleeping without straps, and at 12 years old, Amobi knew little of the wilderness spirits and the dangers they posed. So he shut his eyes and anticipated a good night's rest. But rest never came again. The voice pacified the room like smoke. He searched around, but no one was there. It spoke again. His heart beat in his chest, thinking back to a warning his mother once gave him. Never respond to an unknown voice, for it may be an evil spirit calling you, she had said. Afraid to speak, Amobi tightened his lips and ran out of the room to his father's quarters. His parents would know what to do, he thought. It kept calling, chasing after the boy like an invisible wind of words. The boy ran faster, desperate to get away from the voice. But once he reached the end of his village, Amobi realized his body was not following his command. Instead of taking him to his father's quarters, they led him out of his own home, across his village, and into the most diabolical place in Inri, the wilderness. When he tried to scream, something else came out of his throat.
Spirit of Ikwansu, I come.
Horrified, Amobi slapped a hand to his mouth. He couldn't believe such words had been forced through his lips. And this was only the beginning of a brutal night, one with no end. Amobi marched deep into the night until time itself became void, unaware of how far he walked or where he was going. But whenever the spirit called, he answered. His voice was not his own, nor his body. Even his mind began to diminish. The only thing still in his control were his tears, and he let them flood heavily as he journeyed through a horror no child should have to see. In the wilderness, darkness didn't blacken the night, it illuminated it. There was a murky haze that spread through the desolate place, as if the moon had dispersed its light across the plain. The trees grew in unconventional ways, as if they were aware of their own bodies, twisting and turning to heights Amobi had never seen. As he pushed through the bushlands, he wasn't sure whether he was moving through the wilderness or whether the wilderness was moving through him. Everything seemed alive but cold and malicious, like a cruel imitation of the living. Shadows, were everywhere, behind trees, in between bushes, on top of forest hills. He saw shadows forming into things that weren't shadows, and that's when Amobi realized they weren't shadows at all. They were something too sinister to explain, and whenever he felt their gaze upon him, he shut his eyes and let the voice lead him the rest of the way.
Amobi, are you coming?
The spirit would call.
Spirit of Ikwansu, I come.
He bitterly replied. After endless hours parading through the wilderness, the boy reached a narrow clearing surrounded by bush. A sliver of moonlight peered through the trees onto the barren space, revealing a ghostly figure at its center. Beyond him, Amobi saw both a beast and a man. Its body was human, but twice the size, and unlike the average man, its skin was translucent, as if a person could walk straight through its body and bones. The beast glowed in a deep emerald light that was almost blinding to look upon, and it was shirtless, with cuffs the color of fresh blood around its arms and ankles. Trousers as shiny as snake skin covered its lower half, and its nails curved like sharp hooks on each finger. But it was the head that made this creature most foreign. The head is where the boy found the beast. Its face was not human, nor did it appear to be alive. It was a mask attached to its body in place of a head. Amobi could sense the breath of life that pursed through the opening of its mouth. Its protruding eyes took up most of its face, and its lips were molded into a deep, sinister smile. 2 talons were carved into its forehead, with colorful tribal marks patterning its face, and in place of hair were 1,000 strands of straw, growing wild and rough around its head. A grave look set into Amobi's face as he looked upon the heinous creature. He'd never seen one in person until now, but Amobi knew exactly what it was. The only thing it could be. Osuru. The beast stepped forward, a long crystal cane gripped tight in its hand.
Amobi, do you know my name?
It said,
I am the spirit of greed. It is your turn to pay for the sins of Henry.